It's common knowledge now that the upcoming US election is going to be determined in part by social media. Social media is also proving to be very useful in terms of analyzing how and why the electorate is voting. William Powers is the director of the Crowdwire, which is a new analytics service determining the behavior of the electorate. We're lucky enough to have William Powers on TechCrunch TV today. William, or Bill, because he's an old friend of mine. Bill, welcome to TechCrunch TV.
Thank you, Andrew. Good to be here.
So, Bill, you're also well known as the author of Hamlet's BlackBerry, which was somewhat of a skeptical take on social media and the internet. How did you get from Hamlet's BlackBerry to the Crowdwire?
I actually met some folks at MIT at the Media Lab through the book. And my philosophy in that book, Andrew, is that we need to go deeper with digital, that we're sort of skimming the surface of life and the world and everything we do on the internet rather than going deep. And these folks that I met were on the same page, and they had a startup company called Bluefin Labs that had these powerful analytics tools for social media that they thought might be able to help us understand the election. I got interested in it, we started talking, and we came up with this idea.
And Bluefin Labs is a pretty interesting startup. It's based in Boston, right?
Right, based in Cambridge.
Cambridge. So, Bill, you went from Hamlet's BlackBerry, which was a critique of the way in which we're becoming obsessed with the internet, to a kind of obsession yourself. What are you doing at the Crowdwire? How are you using social media analytics to determine the election?
So what we're doing is we're looking at, there's this massive conversation happening, Andrew, about the election. In the recent conventions, the Democratic Convention alone, National Convention, had 5 million comments posted just on the primetime TV coverage of the 3 nights.
And of course, all of those 5 million comments were profound, weren't they?
I don't know if even a fraction of them were, but there were a lot of comments. It's hard to be profound in 140 characters. There are a lot of comments, a lot of people expressing their views about the speakers, about the platform, and so forth. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity to go into this conversation, the largest political conversation anybody's ever had, and try and figure out what people are saying. Not just count the tweets, which is fairly easy to do, but try and figure out who's saying these things and what exactly they're saying. In other words, get some meaning out of it.
So the Crowdwire is exclusively analyzing tweets, not Facebook, none of the other sources of social media?
We're also doing public Facebook posts, but as you know, most of Facebook is not public, so it's a fraction of Facebook, and then most of Twitter. We only do public posts. We don't do anything that's private.
So Twitter, then, for you, is a touchstone for determining how the electorate's thinking, how they're behaving?
Not the electorate. Nobody can claim with any conviction that social media are a mirror of the electorate, because as you know, only a fraction of the public is on social media. But the numbers are growing rapidly, and that particular...
And what's the fraction, Bill, at the moment? What percentage of the electorate, in your view, is on Twitter?
I have seen different figures, Andrew. The lowest I've seen is 15% of the electorate, but there's a whole other figure for the number of people who use the internet and the percentage of those people that's on social media, and that's over 50%.
So the low of 15 then is not a small fraction. It's still a fairly significant. It's a seventh of the electorate.
Yes, exactly. And these people are very engaged. In fact, politics is one of the biggest topics on Twitter, so these are people who follow politics anyway.
And are these 15% of the entire electorate or of the electorate that votes?
I don't think anyone knows that. I don't know what Twitter has under the hood, but that would be a very hard thing to cross-reference who's on Twitter with voter registration rolls.
So, Bill, what are you learning? You're spending every minute or every hour of the day analyzing political tweets. What are you learning?
So I've been learning some surprising things. For example, one of the things I've learned just in watching those 2 conventions a few weeks ago was that I sort of thought of the conventions as meetings of the faithful, and that the people who would watch the conventions and tweet about them would be true believers of each party. In fact, our analysis showed it was the opposite, particularly for the Republican convention. The people who tweeted most frequently about the Republican convention were people who we've been able to identify as anti-Romney people.
Is it fair to say, Bill, that Twitter is skewing very much to the left, that it's strongly democratic?
That data point would suggest that it is, but I don't have enough data yet to draw that conclusion. That's just one piece of evidence I've found, but not enough to say anything definitively.
Well, what do you have? What data do you have that's shocking, surprising? What are you learning that most of the audience won't already know?
Well, as you know, one of the most sought-after election groups of voters in this election is women voters. Both candidates are going after them very heavily, and we noticed that women voters, most of the data I'm giving you is from the conventions because that's our most recent analysis. Women dominated the response to the Democratic convention, and were in the minority in response to the Republican convention, so that would suggest possible good news for the Democratic Party. So that was a piece of news that I didn't see anywhere else.
Did women respond proportionally more to the speeches of Ann Romney and Michelle Obama?
We found that was the largest section of female response, yes, and that sort of makes intuitive sense.
And are the majority of women tweeting as women, as people thinking of politics from a female perspective, or are most of them tweeting in a genderless context?
They don't typically say, I'm a woman and I'm saying this, but they do often make kinds of observations that wouldn't necessarily feel like it's a male observation. They'll observe, for example, make an observation about the emotional content of the speech in a way that you might not consider typical of a male.
Yeah, and I'm not just discriminating, hopefully, against women. We had a guy on the show last week from Grindr, the gay network, and they're actively using social networks now to promote a gay agenda and push their members into pursuing gay issues. Are you seeing many people on Twitter as gays, as women, as African Americans, as Hispanics, tweeting in that context?
Absolutely. You see people not necessarily saying in the tweet, I'm this kind of a person, but you can tell by the context they use and the way they focus on an issue that that's the thing they care about most. So people go there passionate about issues, and that's what they tweet about.
So finally, we have a true window then on the electorate, or at least on the electorate who are tweeting. Is that fair? Are you learning more than traditional pollsters would?
I don't know if we're learning more, we're learning differently, and there's a lot of rich stuff. We've just begun to scratch the surface. Our next project is to look at how the conversation about the election breaks up between three categories: policy, politics, and personality, the three Ps. We're going to see which of those has the largest share of the conversation. And
are you a consumer-facing business? Are you... you're a non-profit, right? I mean, you're being funded by...
We're a non-commercial project of a for-profit company. So Bluefin Labs is a for-profit company, but this project is not for-profit.
And are you putting your data together for the public or for journalists?
Both. We're doing it. We view the journalists as our first audience because we need them to get the word out that we exist, but we're also hoping to draw in the public as much as we can.
So you're going to have a lot of journalists watching this, Bill. Why should they come to Crowdwire?
Well, I think we're offering a kind of analysis and a depth in social media that nobody else has offered before. We have a way of getting at these groups and what they're saying, who they are, that is pretty unique.
Bill, we got a minute and a half left before I get cut off by my aggressive producer. But in my view, at least, Romney has absolutely no chance. I will say publicly that Obama will win the election. Am I dicing with death here? Am I liable to make a fool of myself?
Well, as you know, the history of American elections is littered with wrong predictions. And in fact, we're not going to make any predictions about the winner of this at the Crowdwire. I would say in the moment we're speaking in right now, this bubble, it certainly looks like the Romney campaign is in disarray. But as you know, these things can turn around. There's over a month to go. There's a lot of turmoil in the world. Anything can happen. And we see that on Twitter. The conversation seems to shift every moment from one trending topic to another. And that's especially true with the election. So I would hold my cards a little closer to my chest if I were you.
I never hold my cards close to
I know
my chest, Bill. Finally, if Romney's watching, and of course he is watching because he watches everything that I broadcast, and he was to become more aggressive in terms of tweeting, what would you advise him to tweet?
Well, he's tweeting quite regularly, and as Obama is as well. So he's out there tweeting. I'm not going to give him advice. We try not to be in the business of helping the campaigns do anything. I just hope he tweets more so we have more material to use.
Well, Bill Powers, thank you, the director of Crowdwire. Fascinating project. And again, Bill, we'll have you back on when we have Obama elected for the second term. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you.